Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Best Picture nominee for 2025. Today, we are talking about an oft-spoken of film, The Substance, directed by Coralie Fargeat. This is a little bit of a horror movie, body horror, rather scary, I would say, for the Academy's tastes, but they picked it nonetheless, and so we, nonetheless, are going to talk about it here because we've all viewed it, we've all watched it, and have some thoughts. I'm curious what you guys have to say, because Tucker and I were discussing a little bit after we watched it, but a little pre-episode chat. Un petit.
This is French, then.
Let us remind you, however, of what we talked about last time so we could waste little time and get back into the substance. Last time, we talked about the film out of Brazil, I'm Still Here. We thought it was pretty good and an interesting look into a fascistic military dictatorship from the 70s in Brazil. We had Anna joining us to discuss and add some context. She's from Brazil, of course, and it was a great pleasure to have her on. So I'd go recommend you check that review out to see the score that we gave it. It was an 8.3, spot number 5 on the list. And now I'll hand it off to Abram, who's got a comment, perhapsingtons, and then we'll dive right in and talk about the substance.
Did you just come up with that? What?
I have a comment here on our Nickel Boys review, and this comes from Jay Galindo 46, who has, by the way, a very funny profile picture on YouTube of Kermit the Frog wearing some sort of hat and jacket.
Oh, go Kermit! You're such a spade.
Oh, you rascal, Kermit.
The comment says, "Great video, guys. Nickel Boys is my favorite, and in my opinion, the best of this year's nominees. About the use of the camera from the back of the characters. The first time we see it is when Elwood is about to be tortured, then of course during all the scenes in the future, but also after Elwood is killed." Oh, sorry, spoilers alert. Spoiler alert.
Oops.
Did you pre-read this? Did you pre-read this thing, or are you just like, a comment? I shall go in.
Mm-hmm. Supposed to be a way of representing the way we kind of detach from our own self in order to overcome trauma. I think that's a very good insight. And if you're an audience member who hadn't watched Nickel Boys, maybe Jay Galindo 46 is lying. Maybe that doesn't happen.
Maybe that doesn't happen in the movie.
They misremembered the film. Of course, that's what it is. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yes. Now, I know somebody among us who we can count on not misremembering the film and giving us a little bit of a plot outline, a plot description. Tanner, what happens in The Substance?
Well, Timo, I'd love to tell you, but hang on, I just gotta hydrate a little bit. I gotta get booted up a little bit.
Oh, activator.
I think now I'm prepared to recount the film.
Yeah, Tanner, everything comes from you. Must remember this.
That's right. That's right. I am the Matrix. Truly, though, the Matrix of this film, whom everything comes from, is Elizabeth. She is a 50-year-old, recently turned 50 actress, Oscar winner who
portrayed by Demi Moore.
Portrayed by Demi Moore, thank you. Who now in her later years hosts a Olivia Newton-John style workout aerobics show.
Yeah.
And she is quickly, because of her age, excised from the entertainment industry by the head of the studio, Dennis Quaid. And she comes in, she gets in a car accident, and while she's at the hospital, she is sort of enlightened to the existence of the substance, which is a cell-dividing sort of process and goop that basically, she takes it and she passes out on the bathroom floor, and Margaret Qualley pops out of her back as a newer, younger, better version of Elizabeth named Sue. Sue quickly
doesn't want that to happen.
That's right. Sue quickly takes on the role of the show, but they must, of course, respect the balance. 1 week on, 1 week off for each of them, and that's a bit of a struggle for the both of them, as we'll get to in the film.
Yeah, there you have it. This is quite the fun movie. Abram, are you a horror movie fan? Do you like horror movies?
Are you a fun guy?
I famously struggle quite a bit with body horror.
What did you think of this one then? How was your time watching it?
I liked it. I thought it was. I think what I was most sort of engrossed by, no pun intended, is the more technical aspect of the filmmaking, a lot of the craftsmanship. I think that the really like anachronistic production design and editing and costuming, the color grading, the really interestingly blocked shots and sequences and beautiful cinematography. I was really taken by that. I was taken by the technical quality of the substance.
Yeah.
I wasn't as grossed out as I thought I would be by the
Okay.
substance for most of it. The teeth pulling and the fingernail falling off was a bridge too far for me.
Oh yeah.
Sure, yeah.
That's
Me
the
too.
worst part. Fair enough.
Me too.
That is the part that I also had to warn my girlfriend about. I had to warn Anna about. I guess I should. I don't have to stop invoking
Friend
her
of the show.
as my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, friend of the show.
Contributor.
Anna watched
Stop
it
calling
with
her
me.
your girlfriend. Call her friend of the show, because that's really how she matters too.
Thank you. Fair
fans.
point. That's a fair point.
So yeah, I liked it a lot. I think that I was sort of less captivated by the narrative than I expected to be. I think I was let down a little bit by the pacing. I think I was let down a little bit by the script, but I was just so largely engaged by the craftsmanship of the substance that, to me, it really did the impossible, which was have me come to this review feeling positive on
Whoa.
a genre that I'm just simply hardwired to dislike.
Yeah,
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Like Tucker in musicals. Speak, Tucker. Would you go next?
Speak, Tucker.
Speak now. Do not
You know,
hold your
you've been
peace.
doing this for about 5 years. You were also a radio host. You feel like at some point you would like.
Stop insulting the host
transition
and
a
just
little
tell us
bit.
about what your thoughts on the
What
movie.
did you think of the substance?
Ladies and gentlemen, nothing better. Nothing better than some weird shit happening in an Academy Award nominated film. Rewatching this movie after seeing it in October, many, many months ago, I was just continually struck not only by how much of it I remembered. I feel like the movie's so focused. I feel like every scene is unique and interesting. I think that's the most with its runtime. I never feel like it drags personally. But I was sitting there, I was flabbergasted. I'm like, the Academy, they know something. There's hope in this world after all, because I think this is one of the best movies I've ever seen, to be completely honest. I think that it lands on all of the many complex themes that it is tackling. It is so bold in all of the creative decisions that it makes, from all the technical aspects that you mentioned, with the really unique direction of its core performances. It knocks all, like, pretty much for me, it knocks basically everything out of the park. And the one area where I can understand some criticism of this movie is in the areas where the movie is very blunt. It is very blunt in a silly, crazy ending. It is very blunt in some of the line writings and delivery that are like crazy B-movie, silly, stupid sometimes. But, you know, we talk about subtleism on this show. But I am coming out here today, ladies and gentlemen, say subtleism be damned. Boldness is the new way forward. Proudly proclaim that you are silly and dumb, but things are important. And the substance knows that. And this movie is just, it's in your face, and it's not ashamed of that. And I'm not ashamed to say that I think it really, really works because of that. And easily my favorite movie of last year. And obviously that does mean it's my favorite of these nominees. And I'm really excited to sort of dig into it because I think it also is textually very, very fascinating. It's fascinating on a filmmaking level and on like a meta-narrative level of it being nominated. But also I think there's a lot to dig into on the themes and performances and characters and stuff. And so I just absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm. Tanner, what'd you think?
Hey,
T-Dog.
for sure, buddy. For sure, I'll love this one too. I really, really enjoyed going back to it and appreciating all the iconography that it has cultivated in just a few months of its release. I have a little bit of merch here myself, of course. But no, I mean the performances are super great. It has its, you know, it's so esoteric and interesting in such a European take on like genre filmmaking, and yes, it is it has its textual complexities, or maybe they're not so complex, as I'm sure we'll talk about. But I don't think this is, you know, it is a silly movie. It is a movie that knows it is having fun with its premise, with its actors, with its set pieces. But I don't think it's necessarily a dumb movie for that. I think it also, you know, cultivates quite a bit of empathy, even for something like Monstro Eliza Sue. And I think there's undeniably, you know, craftsmanship just beyond repair in this thing, or beyond reproach, I guess I should say. Beyond reproach.
Beyond
Yeah.
repair.
You get it. You understand. I love the substance. I'm super excited to be talking about it in a Best Picture nominee recap show.
I will say that I thought this movie was really fun. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think that I have a number of issues here and there with it, mostly in the script. But the technicals, the special effects, sound design, cinematography makes this a really enjoyable film watching experience. I mean, we just like we're hooting and hollering, yelling at the TV, screaming. Like it was fun. It was real fun to watch it at home for me, because you can get those vocalizations, those releases when things that I don't exactly like are happening on screen. So I can whine and moan about them being there, but still watching it nonetheless. So
Well, and the other great part about watching it at home is that when someone's stabbing a needle in their leg, I can reach over and poke you in your leg to make it a 4D experience, which I am delighted in doing.
His little grin as he would reach over. Yeah. So I think that there's a bunch of really fun and well-made stuff. I think like the meta stuff of it being nominated, I think it's one of the first films of this kind of genre. I think we can talk about Shape of Water being the next closest movie, maybe. In like genre-wise, but this just pushes the envelope a lot farther. I don't think it blows the envelope wide open. There's a number of body horror films that pretty much that I like a lot better than this, that are like but they're strongly canonized. The Thing. Like
The Fly.
These like Cronenberg and Carpenter's work is obviously playing in the same circles here. But that's not to say that this isn't a really fun time and a very well made film. So we can get into all of that. But where would y'all like to begin? Maybe with the beginning of the movie and old Elizabeth. What does
All right,
she?
so we crack
Why
some
did
eggs.
she choose to do this? Yes.
No, I think it's important to talk about the I want to talk about the setting. I think is something that's super interesting to me and an interesting place to start, because it of course informs where Elizabeth is coming from. It is a very, again, I'm going to use the word esoteric take on like Los Angeles, where nothing feels real, nothing feels necessarily lived in. It feels very built and artificial, certainly to the point of what Fargeat is going for here. I mean, the way the hallways and the studios are captured are just brilliant stuff to put you on an otherworldly, unsettling sort of mood. Very much where Elizabeth, her headspace is at the beginning of this movie. She is 50 years old. Everyone, that scene when she's walking down the hallway and everyone is wishing her happy birthday is less comforting than it is like frightening, or maybe just like it alerts you every time that there's another person that just comes from behind the camera, basically rushing towards her saying happy birthday, as she walks down this very The Shining inspired hallway, of course. But the exteriors, what brief of them that we see are all very, they're all very controlled and manicured in a way that is very directorially inspired.
Interesting to me because it almost felt it struck me as sort of cyberpunk like.
Sure, yeah.
But before like your Blade Runners and Akira's and things sort of converged a particular visual language for sci-fi, I'm thinking about like William Gibson short stories, wherein the cyberpunk was not like augmentation and implant, but this very anachronistic feeling of the 80s in the future, and this meshing of that really high gloss and gaudy, hyper saturated city life with this technological future and this sort of science fiction horror undercurrent fundamentally changing the way people interface with each other, to use a more technical word about it. So I was really taken just by the street we often walk down on our way to go collect substance refills, the very bright cars we pass, the ways people are dressed, the ways that as we were talking about in terms of the beginning of the film, this very this aerobic video that feels like it's taken from decades ago, but then we're talking on the iPhone. I think it cultivates this very unique and largely forgotten about view of the future, which I think is so interesting and gives it a really unique visual palette that makes, I think, the notion of the substance more believable. It puts it in this sort of
Sure.
literary context that I think is really interesting.
Like the world is one where we could see this kind of sort of underground, sort of known about, sort of not drug, enhancement come across. I think it's, we also are living in the trappings of our Sunset Boulevard world, right? Of our Hollywood and the ways that we all know how the industry
Yeah.
treats its stars and starlets. It's ruthless. And so by setting us in that kind of simultaneously, it is real life, but it's kind of, more than that. Like the imagery is so clean. I think like the ways that the film is like very straight lines, very clean surfaces, very like, a lot of repeating patterns on the grounds and the walls. And only every once in a while, like when we're going to get the refills, is there a set that's very like gritty and kind of that concrete jumbled block, brutalist look of that outside the refill, that center, the Amazon
the
package
alley.
locker,
Yes, exactly.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That the idea that you would go and get your package from a locker like is actually kind of normal to us, and I think that is a really unique and well, it's a clever bit of blending of like modern technology and just the script to like make it flow and make it seem natural and like this is a real like what we're watching is really happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that when we mentioned the production design, I think that is not only one of the great strengths of the movie because of how visually interesting it is, how visually striking it is, how unique and distinct and like immediately recognizable any of these locations that we visit are, but it's also important to note that there's like 3 locations in this movie.
Not very many.
There are a couple of extraneous ones that like have like one scene maybe in them, like a doctor's office or like a cafe. But the bulk of this over 2-hour long movie takes place in just a couple of places, and they production design each of these places within an inch of their life. You've got these long hallways that are really interesting. You've got these big paintings and the big windows and stuff. But it's really just a few places, but your mind never really thinks about that because there's so much going on for the characters and like in the tension and stuff, and like what's going to happen next? How many days do we have left? There's like this cycle that even though it's so limited in like its like on-screen scope, you feel like there's a lot going on. There's these lives being lived, and that like Sue continually has to go from home to the studio and film, and then she's going out to parties and stuff. And you never really see this stuff, but it's so assumed by the life that we know these characters live that you are able to just scope down to just the important places and visit them over and over again and watch things evolve and watch the production design evolve as the different posters are hung up on the walls, as the big picture of Elizabeth is taken down and then it's put back up and then it's broken. And like the movie does the most with its limited scope of locations by having them evolve over time. And one of the great things this movie does, and I think why it appeals so heavily to me, is it feels very regimented, is you can tell how much time is left until certain things happen. It builds attention in a really interesting way, and they match that with the makeup design, the production design, and like the shot composition of repeating things. Okay, here's how much food is left in the bag. Here's how many canisters have been used. Here's the amount of time that you're spending between things. Like the billboard changes as the season is going closer to New Year's. Like everything feels very focused to keeping you in the moment and locking you in the mindset of the characters that are like, they know how much time has passed. They know how much time is left until whatever happens. But they use these visual signifiers to always keep you on track, which I think is so important.
Yeah, I mean, the rules of the world are something that are very clearly laid out. And
yes and no. I would kind of, I actually have some criticism about the rules of this world here.
Well,
continue.
My point being that like the whole vibe and aesthetic of the film is based around like the substance as like a product that has gotten in via back alley, literally back alley means, and the font of it, the design of it, the aesthetic of the instructional video, and the materials themselves as they arrive to you in the box. Like those are all very well implemented into the film too. To speak of production design, I mean there's a reason why they've
the
gained
effect of it.
a level of iconography at this point.
Well, yeah, like the ways that she gets this box, and it's like an IKEA instructions. I mean, the instructions are so bare minimum that there's a lot of gaps, I think, where you're like, oh, like, well, exactly how are you supposed to do that? And the film, I think, is wise to ellipse a lot of that, not really like get too bogged down in the details. And yeah, like that, it's very effective to just like, you're like, it's like, do this, insert, once per day, do that.
Mhm.
And then we're shown that actual process. My criticism of these rules is that I'm left completely knowledgeless about like kind of what is going to happen, but like the mechanics of it. When we split and we go into two different people, there's one
Mhm.
key detail that I feel like I'm missing very heavily, and that is like the like mental and subconscious relationship of our two characters. Like how
Sure. Yeah.
how is it the same person? We are told
Mhm.
you are the same person, but we are shown physically that is not the case. They're actually physical, different bodies. This isn't like a Severance situation where it's the same body and you can't remember, it's two different minds.
Yeah.
It's
Is there shared memory or not?
is
the
there shared
opposite.
memory? And
Well, it's the opposite of Severance. It's one body, or it's two bodies, one mind, as opposed to one body, two minds.
yeah.
Well, I
but
think that's Timo's question though. Is there one
is there
mind
one mind or
is there
not?
two
I think
minds?
that is something that is intentionally left vague
Yeah.
and is in kind of I would like it. I think we get a little bit deeper character knowledge if we know that they are maintaining one consciousness or maintaining two, and I don't think it's
Well-
really explained, and I actually really want to know that while I'm watching.
I think it's very heavily implied through the actions of the characters and some dialogue that it's the same person. The memories of each experience come through, like stay in their mind because obviously, like, okay, basic motor functions and like social knowledge and stuff. Sue has that just like being born
Yeah.
like, immediately.
How does Sue know where to go, or you know how to function
Yeah.
at the studio?
But like even as far as like the same action that Sue performs as she's closing out the show that Elizabeth did, like the where they put stuff when it depends on who's in what body. Like Elizabeth knows to look in the closet for the box of old shit that obviously Sue put in there, and so there are these things that are like, yeah, okay, they do remember the stuff, but I think what's interesting about it and why I find it so compelling, even though you're right, it's never explicitly stated. I think there's enough hints, but I find it interesting that it's vague and that their personalities are so different because of the way they are treated, the way they see themselves. They are different characters at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and they treat other people differently. They treat themselves differently. They react differently to different situations, and so it creates this push and pull dynamic of an interplay between two characters who, until the very end of the film, never meet. And you feel like the animosity and the struggle and the back and forth between them as the balance is being disrespected in different ways. And I just found that so interesting because, like, you know how they feel about each other and they never interact until they, like, just fight.
Yeah, exactly. And, that is, of course, the whole notion of the movie is the relationship between these two women who are the same person, but are, of course, treated vastly differently and looked at vastly differently by both the entertainment industry and society as a whole. I hope I'm not off base by saying this is somewhat of a feminist critique of society, fellas. I mean, I don't mean to go too woke here, gentlemen, but
the wokeometers are preaching a breaking point.
So we gotta be careful with throwing that stuff around because there's a distinct lack of media literacy online nowadays. But no, I mean, it is perfectly in line with Fargeat's like punk rock feminist sensibilities.
Yeah, I agree with everybody.
Wow,
look at this fence sitter.
Well, here I'll get off the fence for a minute here.
Okay,
I
here we
think
go.
the movie is very underwritten in a lot of ways, and
Sure.
this is, I think, sort of
It's a very light
the
script.
yeah, and I think this is sort of the heart of my criticism of the film.
Sure.
Because as we're progressing, well, before things really start to go badly, they start going badly a little bit, and we meet this man in a diner, and it is the older version of the younger, hot
Yes.
OR nurse.
Anna called him a Ken doll as soon as she saw him. I was like, "Who is this Ken doll?"
Sure. And he clues us into sort of what the second half of the film is going to be concerned about when it comes to Elizabeth and Sue, which is
Yeah.
this notion that Sue is going to become, in some ways, parasitic, the sort of side of the self, how about, that is going to want to overpower the other. And then we really put the two in opposition, and that becomes increasingly true until they literally physically come to blows at the end of the
Mhm.
film. I guess what I just am not really moved by is um, this debate between the two sides of the self,
Okay.
and this way that they try to speak to the faceless voice who
Yep.
facilitates the experiment, who they both see.
Experience.
Yeah,
I'm
they
sorry
both
that you did
see,
not
or
enjoy the experience.
they want him to be a mediator, and he's not. He's
Yep.
here to arbitrate the rules, but he's not here to mediate between the two sides of the self. And I don't know. I just think that it wants to have more character work than it does by the end of the
Yeah.
film. And to me, it feels like a disjunction, because I think that the cultural critique is a lot stronger when it is largely visual. Like, I think about the exceptional sequence.
The use of male gaze cinematography in this,
Well,
knowing that we're actually coming from the opposite perspective. You know, I was talking with my friend who was over at our house just moments before we really got into watching it, and she was like, "There's a lot of ass in this movie." And
Yeah.
the movie, she was very right. The movie is lovingly framing butts all over, of all types, many different butts. It uses them to
Yes.
show juxtaposition. But that like
Butts
visual male, like forcing us to stare in a very sexualized way and forcing all these
Yeah.
very sexualized frames right down our eyeballs is completely intentional, of course, and is designed to either like make us feel aroused in like an uncomfortable way, or straight up make us feel uncomfortable because of what we, as modern and educated and Me Too viewers, like we're knowing to look for this for a deeper meaning than, I see ass, I'm happy. Like that's like we are a
Neuron
little
activation.
bit like
Yeah.
a bit beyond that in the movie.
Yeah, to take a sip from the
scene.
activator. Neuron activation.
that's sort of my encapsulation of a lot of my issue with the film. I think that when we try to lean more on the script to get further to meaning, I think we are operating with the film's weaknesses as opposed to its
Yeah.
strength.
Mhm.
I completely agree. And again, that's what I mentioned at the beginning, that there are like moments of dialogue, character interactions that are silly, stupid, basic. Like there are lines that these, especially the male characters, are delivering that feel goofy. They feel ridiculous. They feel cornball B science fiction horror movie. And I think it's interesting, and not only because, but what I will say is I do think that it really does work for me. Under the auspices of this not being a movie that was created to be a Best Picture nominee, Cannes nominee, like these things.
Not
This
awards
was-
bait, you're saying.
Yeah, no, it's not awards bait at all. This is basically a high production value, or at least very visually pleasing, very visually regimented, high craft version of, the Wasp Woman from 1956 or whatever. Like this is ostensibly the modern version of an old science fiction B movie. And then we're watching it through the lens and reviewing it, of course, through the lens of it being nominated for all sorts of awards and being a highly critically acclaimed film. And so I come at it instead wanting to watch it for why it was created, rather than the context of why I'm watching it for, literally this review, is that it's intended to be silly. It's intended to be simple in these ways. And so these moments of dialogue that I agree are underwritten and not not great lines in a lot of situations. Like, they're funny lines a lot of the time. I think that the characterization and the writing they work for what this movie is going for. Because you're right, Abram. It's not the movie's strength, but it plays to its own strengths, which is it doesn't write a lot of character moments. It doesn't write a ton of dialogue. This is a largely wordless film, and it's a lot through performance and acting that I would say I disagree that we lack characterization, especially through the only two actual characters of the movie in Elizabeth and Sue. I feel that I understand a lot of their motivation and their personality very clearly, mostly through performance and not necessarily through dialogue. But the movie plays to its own strength. And I think even the area where I totally understand a criticism being levied, I think in my mind, it's a secret strength. I'm like, aha, that was intentional. And I think that's actually a really cool subversion of what you'd usually expect a movie to be, because I do think it's pulling from a different set of roots, which is, again, sort of like big science fiction movies.
Here's where I have to raise some qualms here. Because,
I do too. So you first.
Okay, well, I don't think that we draw these lines around like, well, this movie wasn't meant to be a Cannes Oscar movie. I was like, I don't think we are fully being fair to the film or the people who created it. It obviously was chosen for these high accolades, and they chose to submit it at Cannes, and
it costs a lot of money to run an awards campaign to get nominated, so they had to put that up somewhere in the process.
It won the Best Screenplay Award at the Cannes Film Festival. Coralie Fargeat is a very smart filmmaker, and yes, while she is not actively engaging with the like cinema verite or any of these other European film movements, there's nonetheless intentionality to all of her decisions here that are aiming for a level of prestige. Like, there's a reason that she is tackling the themes in this film the way that she is, and not in a way that is like hammy in a completely different way. I think that it walks such a narrow tightrope between all of the ways that it is operating. I mean, the reason why some of these lines feel different, or the side characters outside of like Elizabeth Sue and to an extent Dennis Quaid feel the way they do, is because
Harvey.
So
Harvey.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
well,
the movie producer
very
named
intentionally
Harvey.
named.
That tells you everything you need to know about subtleism.
And like she clearly is directing Quaid in a way that is very distinct and very intentional in a way, because that's not the actor that Quaid is. So she's given him very clear inspiration for what he's doing with this character, and like she could have cast 22-year-old American actors for everybody else, but she didn't. She pulled from a French cast and had them speak English and sort of try to embody like these empty, vain Los Angeles party people. Like it's not like an accident that the lines sound goofy or silly. It's very intentional choice.
I totally read it that way. And I actually don't have any issues at all with these hammy, like really cheesy lines. It's totally comes off as intentional and as just how these types operate. That these type of people are earnestly saying that crazy stupid line, or are acting in that way. But my I'm going to circle back a bit to the characters here. That my issue is in a lack of characterization. Not in like motivations. Like, I think I understand the motivations pretty good for all these characters, like why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
But where I'm missing, where I feel like this film misses on a great opportunity to explore even deeper, is in this difference between our two characters. And that clearly, the Elizabeth and Sue are on two sides, are on two different worlds. They have different goals from each other. They don't like each other. And yet I am left confused as to why that is, and what is it in first Elizabeth's personality and then in Sue's personality that causes this kind of rift. Is Elizabeth, what was she like when she was Sue's age? Clearly she was a star. Clearly she made quite a career to have the star on the sidewalk, and then be in this position to
she
lose
won an Oscar for what was that movie?
Yeah, like, okay, so these kind of, the film chooses, and this is an issue I guess that I have with it, that it chooses to be inspecific in a lot of realms. It chooses to not have a very specific television network that we're working for. It's just called the
Yeah.
network. It chooses to have a show.
Show.
The show. We called it the New Year's Eve. And
Yeah.
these are choices, right? And I'm gonna pick my side and say that I just disagree with that as a creative choice. I think that does not inspire within us much understanding or learning because we don't get anything from that other than she works for a TV network. That's a TV network, and she's on a show, and that extends to the characters that like Elizabeth is an actor who is fading past her prime. Is not quite ready for her close up, I guess, and then Sue is something else. But because I don't think we're given. It's just a little bit. We just need a little bit more interiority to understand
Yeah.
like why these people are like they are beyond just the level of what we should assume about them given their Hollywood position. I think this film is expecting us and allowing us to make a lot of assumptions about the characters, but
Yeah.
we still can't put in that final little, like the reasoning for, okay, why does Sue feel the need to just take over this kind of two-sided life so strongly? Like, why does Elizabeth really, not why does she want to take the substance? I think that's obvious, but why does she allow it to continue on? What is the desire like deep within her specifically that is kind of driving all of these character decisions and performances? So it's like I'm missing a little bit of that. A flashback scene would have done it for me, or evincing what the characters are thinking inside of them would have done something.
I'm going to say something never thought I'd ever say in my entire life.
Oh, here we go.
I wish the substance was more like Gaspar Noé's Climax, which is a movie I hate.
Okay, all right. So you want to hate it more?
I think your point, Timo, about exteriority and interiority is interesting because something that really strikes me as a strong creative choice in the film, in the substance, is how silent it is a lot of the time.
Yep.
It's very eerie.
And how it lets sound design operate as a rhythmic score.
And I think that that's really effective. And that's sort of where a film like Climax was evoked for me, where the narrative is exterior. It's all exterior. Climax is so visceral and it's so interested in craft. And the substance is too. But I think my issue is I think the substance tries to split the difference a little bit too much.
Mhm.
And I wish it would have been entirely exterior. Because obviously that's where a lot of the commentary is. I think about a moment like when
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid is eating the shrimp, which is an incredible filmic sequence.
A
And you learn
legitimately queasy making sequence. It actually
Yeah.
made me feel like wanting to barf.
You learn so much about how he carries himself, how he feels about the woman across the table, how he feels about his status in society by the way he eats the shrimp. I think that this film is able to operate so well, so wordlessly. And I think that in a film that leaned harder into that leaned fully exterior, I wouldn't be left as you are, Timo, kind of wondering about what our characters are thinking. Because it's not so much that I don't really get them. I think I get them because I think the point of the movie is quite clear. I think it's as
Mhm.
simple as Elizabeth has been formed by a culture of exteriority, and her worth is tied to that. And so to live as Sue is to find her place in the order and hierarchy of Hollywood again. I like that a lot. But I just feel like whenever we digress, whenever we try to do more than that, I think I get lost a little bit. And there's another thing that the climax is, which the substance isn't. Climax is like 90 minutes long.
Sure.
And I think I made this criticism in the Discord, and I'll stand by it now. It's a pacing thing. It's a lack of specificity thing. I just simply think that this premise, if it was totally exterior and we got rid of even a little bit more and we leaned harder on the visual storytelling, we had a shorter, tighter film, I think I would be more roundly behind it. Because I also find myself like Timo in these sequences of downtime just sort of wondering. And I think when you wonder, you start to realize how little the film wants to tell you, which is intentional, but don't give me time to think about that, I guess.
Just put me right back in the moaning. Just make me feel horrible and anxious and all wrapped up. Like you are so good at that. It's so good at making you
So I
feel
have a question for you,
raw
gentlemen.
emotion. Mhm.
what are the moments that you're feeling that, I guess? Where are the moments, where are the holes, the depressions in this film where you're feeling a lack of I guess interiority? Like what questions is that leading you
A
to?
lack of exteriority.
Well, I think a lot, or let me answer what I don't like by talking about something I like.
Okay, here we go. Sure.
Ah,
I really love the moment when Sue is performing. They're in a rehearsal, and she bends over, and the chicken bone sticks out of her ass.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then she has to go to the bathroom, and she has to pull it out her belly button. And we come to realize that there is this resentment of Elizabeth's behavior played out visually. Why would this old hag be eating this big, slimy, greasy chicken? I have to say, nice and thin for this show. I,
Mhm.
I get that, but I think that there's a large portion of the film where I'm waiting for the inevitable. I'm waiting
hmm.
for them to be put in opposition. I know what's going to happen,
Mhm.
what the end result is going to be. I know that
I
the
know
balance will not be respected.
I know that a third homunculus is approaching it, you know.
And so
Yeah.
I think that there's this portion where the film leaves me expected to be more invested in the specifics of Sue and Elizabeth's interplay,
Mhm.
and
It's
Sort
the
of like, yeah,
moments where
the
we're
waiting
seeing
until they merge, or they fight each other and
it's
merge
that, like,
into Monster Elizabeth.
progression
Sure.
of, we see it with the food, I think. I'm still confused about, honestly, how that's even supposed to just function in the film, like, because they are of separate bodies, right? So, like, what one puts into their body shouldn't affect the other one, or does it or not? Like, and so that's that, and we have resentment because of this. Is the resentment because of the eating from does Sue resent Elizabeth because of the eating, or because of the mess, or what? I don't understand how these things, like, connect to each other, really. Like,
Well, here's the thing that I think the movie where it not quite so secretly, but I think maybe a little more subtly than its other things, ties in a very important thing that I think answers a lot of these questions, which is the idea of addiction and the mindset that using a drug can put you into, where
yeah.
you feel you are not in control of yourself. And so the balance of this movie and the idea of taking a substance and waking up from something and feeling like you have lost time or made decisions that you then regret. That is the jump in where you may see a jump in logic. I see a skillful incorporation of the theme of addiction and the ways a drug can impact your mind, because these characters don't know how to react to this situation. They are put
Mhm.
into a moment where their mind and their body, they're experiencing something that they don't know quite how to react to. And so they're reacting viscerally to it. They're reacting in ways that aren't quite logical because it's an emotional reaction. The where I am able to sort of add my own, I think, reasonable lore to this movie of the idea of it's one brain, the one perspective being shifted back and forth. And so there is still this uh latent emotion and feeling of unease from either side that is carried over, and so we get these moments when they're mad at each other for doing things, but it's because they then regret that. No matter which body, which mind we're in at the moment, it's because that one person, they are ostensibly one person at the end of the day, regrets the action that they took, and then it's just externalized through the hatred of that other personality. The disgust of that other personality is discussed at themselves, even though it's at another person. I think that's, again, the feeling like you're not in control of yourself, feeling like you need to keep taking these steps. It's addiction. That's the thing that's causing these drives and these confusing moments and these things that I think this movie is ultimately really about. We can talk about the misogyny element of it, we can talk about the Hollywood element of it, but I think the drug use and the drug addiction and the way that can impact your mind is another really strong thematic element of this movie. That the narrative, I think, is really a lot more about the addiction, whether that's to fame or to drugs, than it
What's the
is
difference,
about.
baby?
I think what's the difference?
Whoa.
What's the
Yeah,
difference?
well, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
literally. Let me offer up another interpretation of this whole dynamic that sort of commands the back half of the film, the second act of it, effectively. It is a feminist like war, I guess. The expectations and the different ways that society treats older women and younger women has creates such an antagonistic relationship between them, and that is amplified in Elizabeth and Sue.
Yeah.
I mean, we say that like we say that like they both regret things that they have done, but the dynamic is really that Sue feels robbed, that she has to give a week of her time, a week of her fame over to Elizabeth. And
Yeah.
Elizabeth, sort of doesn't like that, that Sue is pulling at that chain, yanking at that chain, wanting more time, and ultimately causing, rapid aging of her body. But you kind of understand that Elizabeth she was in denial of the fact that her life was over, but internally she had internalized that message that like her career in Hollywood, her fame is her life, and now she is effectively condemned to this penthouse apartment. And well, she doesn't want to admit that while it is confronting her when her finger or her leg it becomes wrinkled and gnarly. Like it is affirming the internalized misogyny that she's had for years and years and years. So yeah, and then it is like when she is watching Sue on the television, she resents her for being so
Mhm.
poppy, acting so ditzy for the camera. But you have to imagine that she was trying to do the same thing when she was 20
And
years
that she
old in
did
Hollywood
the
in the
same
80s.
thing.
She did the same thing, and that's exactly what I think Fargeat is aiming at here. Is that women of a certain generation looking down upon, judging younger women for operating in a very similar system that they lived in, or even operating in a different level, a different kind of society, a society that is maybe perhaps more liberated, but still quite misogynist. And so that judgment comes down even harsher by those perceived slights, those perceived advancements that like things I could never do when I was your age, and you're taking them for granted, etc., etc. I think Fargeat is very in tune with like this generational war amongst women.
I think
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
totally right, Tanner. And I think a scene that really did move me towards the end of the film, because I really did, to be clear, I got back on board as things were going really wrong. And I
Of
don't
Oh,
course.
yeah.
just mean when the third Resident Evil creature pops out of
Uh-huh.
the back.
No,
Please,
but, like,
Abram, Monstro Eliza yes.
Monstro-
Monster Lizu, Abram, you make a great point about the Resident Evil thing, because Monster Lizu even has glowing weak spots that you could shoot with like a
She
comedic
does.
bazooka. That would
She has
then
like pulsating mounds on her. You're like, oh, I think I need to blow that up.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's a scene shortly before that where Sue is giving an interview, and we have Elizabeth watching the interview from home.
Yeah.
As she's cooking just disgusting food. The images of the
French
food in
food,
this movie,
so,
to
yeah.
me, yeah, are even grosser than a lot of the body horror, which is
Yeah.
intentional. And I want to talk more about that. And I want to talk about the way that men are framed, women are framed, the way that the TV show operates. But in terms of this scene in particular, I think you're right about not only this internalized misogyny, but also this culture of pitting women against each other.
That's true. Why must our beautiful queens fight?
The line of questioning from our host inviting Sue to disrespect Elizabeth
Exactly. Yeah.
is illustrative of that sort of desirous culture for drama
Mhm.
and
Sure.
this sort of foregrounding of beauty. The show ends with, "Can you give us a beauty tip?" There is this very clear role of women in the narrative, which is to be attractive, and that sexual desire is currency. Because Elizabeth is an interesting character in the narrative in that she is extremely wealthy. She has no material concerns. She lives in
Yeah.
this beautiful penthouse. She doesn't have to work anymore. We get no indication that she has any practical concerns other than what has been impressed upon her for decades of working in this industry. So I think that the film is largely interested in, through sequences like this interview, and obviously through the scenes with Dennis Quaid's Harvey, in characterizing a Hollywood in which the worth of these two women is defined by the men around them and also the women around them, and
Mhm.
more specifically, the way that that puts a downward pressure on Elizabeth, which then puts a downward pressure on Sue. So I think that it's all in there, as you're saying, Tanner. I think that it's to me ultimately, I just think that the ramp up to it just doesn't work for me as well as
Okay.
it's saying when we get there.
Mhm.
Should we talk performances?
Yes. Yeah, let's do
Okay.
it. I
Let's
mean,
talk Demi.
Demi Moore, I think, is very, very excellent in this and very sagely captures the kind of like that aged, not really,
She is, by the
star.
way, want to point out, Demi Moore, 62 playing 50 in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, looks great.
Yeah.
We're, I think we're operating still in this similar performance realm, taking cues from Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard. Like this
Yeah.
kind of character has been done a bunch in Hollywood, but I feel that she is fresh, and I get what her character is pretty much right off the bat. And then to see her in the second half of the movie when she's really grappling with what her other self is doing and doing to her, taking from her, that is, I think, some of those moments of pain that, so screams she lets out that we hear like echoing down the 40-foot long bathroom hallway. Like that is terrifying. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's fantastic. I mean, there's ultimately like she has her big moments. Of course, everyone points to the her getting ready for the date with the mirror as this moment that perfectly encapsulates the feeling of inadequacy that is inherent to, that is the core of the character of Elizabeth. And Demi, I mean, first of all, it is so like commendable that she took on a role like this. All three of the leads, especially, but I mean, it is all on Demi's shoulders. She is the Matrix, of course. Everything comes from her. She is the tone setter for this thing. She is the face of the film. Whether she be in front of the camera, and I love the way that we often see the camera itself like sort of opening the iris as it takes in the
Mm-hmm.
visage of whether it be Elizabeth or Sue or whomever. But she also has to do like she has to sell likably and believably these like wicked witch things that she's doing as she's like stirring a foie gras or gutting a turkey or whatever, pulling out its guts with her
Oh
bare hand.
yeah.
She has to
Yeah.
sell all of this. And it is such a huge task for an actress to do that. And then at the same time, 10, 15 minutes later, have an intensely quiet moment to herself in prosthetics with, a Jekyll and Hyde-esque face makeup going on. And like command the audience to basically get inside of her head and feel what she is feeling. This desperation. I think of the scene, of course, when she is on the phone asking to end it for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
where she's like, I can't end it now. I mean, I look at me. I have to. I am condemned to this tower essentially. I just have to live vicariously through this younger, better version of myself, and know that I, for a week, have to live in total not squalor, but as some sort of monster up here that I can't go out or talk to anyone. It's a lot for Demi Moore to do, and she does it all super, super well.
Yeah. And I think what is so fascinating about the performance is the way that it evolves. And this is very the Fly coded, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but in the way that she's so she's so reserved for that first 30, 40 minutes of the movie, other than the moments that we see of her like on screen, big smiles, big aerobic movements. She's quiet and she's like sitting by herself in a lot of sequences and looking at the newspaper or sitting quietly in the in the cafe or in the
Mhm.
doctor's office or in the scene with Dennis Quaid at the restaurant. Like she's basically wordless in most of these scenes, and it's a lot of very subtle facial acting. But because she's so quiet, I think for a lot of the movie you struggle to understand her interiority, Timo, as you were mentioning,
Mm-hmm.
because she's not saying much. And it isn't until the emotions and the stress of the sci-fi situation of this are amplified and amplified and amplified, that she starts talking. She starts talking to herself about Sue, talking more on the phone with the nebulous substance man about the situation that she's going through. And it becomes, that's the interiority, is her talking about her stresses, her struggles, the regrets that she has, to either herself because she's basically going crazy, or to the guy on the phone because she has to explain it. And I think it's a good way to get into her mindset of her just like, it's a say and show. Hey, it's a show and tell. That's what I meant to say. It's a show and tell. Someone should, patent that. And I like the way that then, as those emotions are ramped up, we go from a very quiet, usually sitting very quietly performance, to a really impressive physical performance where she is lumbering down the hall and like throwing things and stumbling and slapping stuff. Like, that is not easy to do. And the range that this performance commands from the beginning to the end is a complete 180 of personality and physical ability and vocal performance and stuff. And it's really, really impressive. And it's all also then contained in her eyes, which I think kind of look simple and dead at the beginning, like the life has been sucked out of her. She doesn't know where to go. And then you get, when she's in full crazy Jekyll and Hyde prosthetic, all you can see are Demi Moore's eyes, and they are then recognizably Demi Moore's eyes. And there's so much more emotion and personality and life in the moments when she is completely disfigured. And the performance is then showing only through the eyeballs, because everything else is covered in all sorts of nonsense. It's everything that an actress can do encapsulated in one. And also, of course, you have to then meta-analysis put this on the fact that she was a model actress, Baywatch actress from 30 years ago, and hasn't gotten many performances, especially not ones that have been received critical acclaim ever in her career.
A career thing as well, for sure.
Yeah, and so then you get a visionary director like Coralie Fargeat, who picks Demi Moore obviously for a specific reason of like, this mirrors her own life, and I can give her this second shot that then gives her another chance at recognition and redemption and stuff. And I think that's really, really smart. And but just quickly, I think you could also parallel that with the way that Michelle Yeoh was sort of brought back into prominence with Everything Everywhere. Like, the role was made for her. It's about a middle-aged woman, like recapturing her life and stuff. I think it's just really, really smart casting, and then delivered excellently.
Anybody got anything to say about Margaret Qualley?
Nah.
I mean, she is quite similarly good, and in a very similar vein, very, very well cast in this role, as the young, who is that? Oh, she just has an aura about her, a charisma that is uniquely enrapturing. And she is so personable. She has a down to earth quality about her.
No, she doesn't.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, they say that in the movie, but no, she doesn't. That's like a marketing thing. She doesn't feel down to earth at all. Sue is the fakest person that was ever existed.
Yeah. The character of Sue. Yeah. But no, I mean, she's also does very well. She has to play a prima donna at times, a diva, who is effectively throwing a tantrum at the fact that she has to share her life with somebody. And she displays all of that anger, that resentment so well. And when she's in like the Harvey's office, she very much does the fear in the wake of like, what is Harvey going to sort of react negatively towards my when she says like she's only available every other week or whatever. But then he is so enraptured by the idea of her. He's like, we will, bow to any mother, brother, or sick dog that, comes up
puppy.
and sick puppy. And then, she has the things where she has to be pulling out her fingernails and her teeth. Like, she gets the more standard body horror stuff of like, her body is literally falling apart. The smile that she pulls towards the end of the film is so good. The frightened face is so real. I love the
moment with the chicken bone, but the one that happens right before, where it's just like making fun of people who work on set, which is, that's me, so I like it.
Mhm.
When they're like, let's
Let's go
review
frame by frame.
let's review the
Frame by frame.
footage. It's
I
like,
love
it's
that
like,
scene.
it's so over the top, like misogynist, right? To like,
Mhm.
let's use our high definition cameras to inspect this perceived flaw in this woman's
Yeah.
body. But
And of course, she is like the sexual eye of the movie, and of course, the sexual eye is something that is so well done as well, because it's just so egregious and
It's, like,
extreme
so
that
egregious.
it's not sexy at all. It's not. I don't feel
Yeah.
titillated. I feel like, God, there's just a lot of like shiny
Butt.
jiggling going on.
a lot of butt.
This is the point I wanted to raise. I think in some ways it is a much more vulnerable and challenging performance, even than what Demi Moore does, even with everything.
Yeah.
Which not to take away from Demi Moore, it's just to say that in some ways I'm even more impressed by what Qualley does, because the narrative device of the TV show is so interesting in that it allows us to juxtapose different views of the body. This like hyper pornographic view that the TV camera takes against these shots of her, these violating and as you're saying, Tanner, extremely unsexual shots of her lying on the bathroom floor
Mhm.
when we switch into the other body.
Yeah.
And even the fact that just like for the performance, she had to have prosthetic boobs because they wanted her to be this like archetypal sex.
Yeah, they've augmented her body even in the making of the film.
Yeah, I think it really to put yourself in that position and allowed to be shown from these different ways and to be manipulated in these ways for the purpose of drawing the clear and unmissable criticism about beauty as currency, I think is really, really exceptional.
Yeah, and it's something that you have to be in tune with as an actress. I'm sure she and Fargeat had many meetings about this. That like, yeah, I mean, Demi is like the beating heart of the movie and has her, sort of her nude scenes as well. That she is exposed. But Margaret Qualley is just so much the apple of the eye of the cameras, both as they film the actual movie and the cameras in the studio. Has to interact in these uncomfortable scenarios with people like Dennis Quaid, who I'd like to talk about briefly as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I quickly want to talk about
Yeah,
the
go for
camera
it.
work,
Go for it.
because one thing I really like about the variety of camera work in this is it operates in a couple of modes. There's the really sharp angles, sharply framed, really deep depth of field, far away, and a lot of times. And of course, there are these hyper close-ups and fisheye lenses and stuff. And so it's doing all this very hyper stylized stuff. And you get used to that at a certain point. I think the movie sort of lulls you into its sense of tone and its way that's going to frame faraway shots and things. But you're broken out of that sense of this is the substance's style when we then watch the fake TV shows that it is mimicking, because it mimics the camera work of reality TV and late night TV in such great ways that when we are finishing like the first Pump It Up thing and you get that like high speed like camera movement where the camera like swings down, goes and it lands on with Sue, and I'm like, that is so reality TV.
Yeah,
like,
Anna
camera
literally
movement.
pointed out this like it's Love Island. That's what she pointed out. She's
it's
like,
Love
it's exactly
Island.
like Love Island.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
like the visual style of it.
Yeah, I think it's just really impressive that they're,
Mhm.
especially on the cinematographer side, that they captured that reality so well. So even to your point, Timo, that it's intentionally generic. Everything is the show, the TV station, the substance. I do think it mimics enough of believable reality, even when it is over the top. It then makes you think, and of course, this is the intent of, man, media is over the top, and the fact that we that these things are on TV in the first place is kind of ridiculous and crazy.
If I may, the whole like interpretation, the setting, the look, the feeling is a very like European cynicism towards American media. Being filtered, that's what Fargeat is filtering this all through, which is what makes it like that much funnier. And like at the same time, it's like the French don't really have a leg to stand on. sort of criticizing Americans for being vain party people. Sure, yeah. But I think nowhere is that better encapsulated than in Dennis Quaid's unreal performance. Truly a baffling sort of choice here. Especially, this film came out in the United States just a few short months after Dennis Quaid very earnestly played Ronald Reagan in Reagan, and then you watch this and you're like, how did they get him on board for this? What does he think of him being in this movie? What did he think that he was doing here? Because it is so gaudy what he's doing and how he looks and how he's photographed in this film that you're like, it's perfect in a lot of ways. It is a perfect like character that Fargeat is just taking the hammer to in all these scenes, though he never really gets his comeuppance until the final scenes of the movie. But like from the very moment you see him sidle up to the urinal
shot,
yeah,
man.
and you're like right on his mouth at a weird angle as he's like laughing and chortling about how old Elizabeth is. And he's like, hey, the women's ovaries start drying up when they're 25. You got to get to work. Like he has all those old man, super misogynist, disgusting laugh moments down, and then the shrimp eating, and when he sees Elizabeth from the end of the long hallway, he's like, oh, and it's like phenomenal.
And
Great.
he always asks, where is she? Where is she? Whenever he goes like, it's just ridiculous.
I have one more. One more line reading that I love. It's when I think his assistant, whose name is Isabel or something, when she's like, he couldn't remember her name, so he goes, who has time to say that? Your name's Carrie.
Yeah.
So good.
I think that it's in the depiction of him that I have a hard time believing Fargeat is French, because like I look at him as this exceptionally precise skewering of this very contemporary, and this is why it's interesting to bring Reagan into the conversation also.
Yeah.
This very contemporary cult of personality, like extremely surface level and gross sense of decadence that a lot of these types of people on the right want to inhabit
are just gaudy and disgusting.
Oh man,
too.
yeah.
He's like if Mar-a-Lago was turned into a person.
Yeah.
and I think that her capturing of that is again part of why the movie works with this in its larger cultural critique. I think he's a really critical part of the movie.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love him.
And but the great part is that I feel that, again, the movie plays to its strengths. You don't get a wide supporting cast in this movie. There are a lot of people who show up for maybe one or two scenes, and there's a lot of background actors, and of course in the dance performances and all of that. But we're really basing this around three core performances. In Harvey, Sue, and Elizabeth, and all three of them are like the one that you're like, oh, well, they light up this scene, or they really steal the scene when they're in the scene. It's like, guys, that's the whole movie. You don't get like the one crazy side performance that really captures you. You're really captured by all three of them. And so I think this movie, unlike many others, is able to feel really consistent throughout because it knows when to like pick and choose its battles. Of course, you get Frank as a side character, and I think he is pretty good. And whatever, I can't remember the neighbor's name, but oh my god, he is
Oliver.
funny,
Oliver.
Oliver.
Well, he says, I think the subtitles on my copy said Oliver the first time that he gets it out, but then Sue calls him Oliver because hey, same person, she knows who her neighbor is.
And then there's a moment. God, there's that moment when Elizabeth is on the other side of the door and like he's like, "Oh, I know you're there. I see you peeking through," and she like yells some sort of fucked up witch deep voice thing, and he scoots back and like stumbles and like does like a crazy pratfall. I'm like, oh my god, the physical comedy of this movie is really good, actually.
When Babushka Elizabeth goes out of the house to and is like, "Oh, fuck off!" Like that's a good moment, and he's like, "Ah."
Briefly, Fred, I want to talk about Elizabeth's old classmate. It's a small part of the film, but I think very emblematic of why Elizabeth doesn't necessarily have she doesn't have like friends or anything like that, because
Mhm.
this one guy that we see talk to or outside of like a professional or substance setting is this guy that's like, wow, it's so great to see you. You haven't changed. Boy, I was sure a big fan of all your movies and stuff. Hey, do you want to go out to dinner? And like on the surface, he is nice, and it makes sense why Elizabeth would want to like go out to dinner with him or whatever. But you also get this distinct feeling that he is pursuing her as as an object, not necessarily as someone he wants to actually connect with. He's very much
Sure.
putting her on a pedestal of like, oh, my 10th grade classmate who is a big time movie star now. Here's my shot. And like even the text that he's sending when she blows off their date, and he's like, I know a star like you likes to make an entrance. Like that is overriding all of his communication with her. And so there is just something off about all of his scenes. His like his 2 scenes, I guess technically,
Yeah.
with her.
So the last thing I want to talk about here is
Yeah.
just the ending, because I really like it. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's just cool.
It is cool.
It's fun. It's cool. I love watching all those people that I've been trained to hate from the movie get sprayed with blood
Yeah. For so long.
for so long.
With Doom music playing in the background.
Yeah, it's great.
We return to the 2 like casting agents
Mhm.
who discover
Mhm.
Sue, and they make a remark about the woman that was before. They say something to the effect of like, man, I really wish that woman's tits were on her face so I could just look
Yeah.
at that, because she's ugly, or whatever they say.
Yeah.
They're a little bit different than that, but I don't remember exactly.
They're not that different than that.
To invoke that line again,
Mhm.
and to treat Monstro Elizasu as this like basically like monkey's paw version of what these misogynist men want, this
Mhm.
big piece of meat
Mhm.
that
Yeah, sure.
It's just an amalgamation of body parts. Yeah.
vomits up a breast.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
exactly.
vomits a boob.
Uh-huh.
And well, you get what you fucking deserve.
Well, how about that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I love Monstro Elizasu. I mean, when she's introduced, there's a distinct Frankenstein sort of vibe to her that just immediately endears
It's just a fun
you
moment to be watching
Yeah.
because you're just like, I'm like, I know what I'm about to see is gonna be real fucked up. I know
Yeah.
there's they've conjured up some nasty thing, some nasty shit to look at, and they hold the mirror back, they don't let you look in the mirror, and then they do, and you're like, ah,
But there's so much like sweetness to like to like when she puts the poster of Elizabeth on her face and puts the lipstick on it with the earrings and everything. Like there is so much heart to that. Like it's not to the point where Fargeat is like, look at this fucking crazy fucked up thing we made. It's a lot like this thing doesn't know what it is really, and it is really just pared down purely to it wants to be beautiful. It wants to other people to think that it is beautiful, but it is so far in the opposite direction that people are disgusted and scream in its face, and it doesn't understand why. It is still Elizabeth. It is still Sue, but it's not appealing to look at. So it must be blown up by being hit with a mic stand, and then spray gallons and gallons of blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
stuff.
It's a great ending. And then
also-
and then the little brain slime ends up on the star and dissolves,
Nice.
and which
Yeah.
is then wiped away.
Yeah.
Zamboni.
I will quickly mention again why I think this movie worked is it's not afraid to not be subtle. I mean, the amount of specific line callbacks we get at the exact moment that they are supposed to be relevant
Mhm.
would feel cheap and easy in other movies, but I do think that it so strongly sets up its own style that you not only come to expect it, but understand that it's like it is playing into the corniness of that. And I've specifically recalled these moments when there's like the overimposed little circle version of like a man's
Dennis Quaid's face.
Like,
Yeah.
that like pops up in this thing, and I'm like, it is so funny and it is so on the nose. But again, it keeps this movie in the ever moving state where it's like this is all relevant everything is wrong, which I think why for me is why I disagree that the movie has pacing issues or that I felt that it was dragging or that there was any sequences that I didn't particularly find less interesting than the others, because I do feel like the movie is always building to things. And maybe for me, it's because I just find this sci-fi concept and the rules of this and the back splitting open and the practical effects and everything so compelling that I'm willing to just exist in the in-between tension moments because I want that lull. I want to be built back up to another horror sequence. But I do feel like the movie utilizes its runtime so well that for me, this shit flew by. I mean, I don't really remember how I felt the first time because first time watching it, I was just like, what the hell is going to happen next? I can't even imagine where we're going to go. But the second time around, it could have honestly been 45 minutes and I would have been none the wiser because I was like, I had a big smile on my face the whole time, like, oh boy, can't wait to get the next scene, can't wait to get the next scene. And it just continually delivered. So I love that it's bold and brash and in your face with all of this stuff and again, the ending is the icing on the cake. It's like, and I talked to my mom about this movie. She watched it because she's a SAG voter, and we talked about it for a long time. And the thing that I come down on is, with all its brashness, while I can certainly understand people criticizing for it and then not being for them, it's a very acquired taste, specific style movie. I'm like, would the movie really deliver its message as effectively if it was holding back on any of this? If it was holding back on the amount of gratuitous butts that you see, if it was holding back on the physical body horror and backs ripping open and all this crazy like blood and guts stuff, that is all there to accentuate the fact that Hollywood is ridiculous, overexposed sex and overexposed gore and nudity and all these things are what sells, and it is mocking those and it is leaning into that. And so when you get this crazy Frankenstein kill the monster ending with blood everywhere, Rob Zombie is cheering in his seat. That is the kind of ending that this movie needs, because it needs to show that the amount of blood and guts and ridiculous nudity and all this stuff is what sells movies. But that's the point of this movie, is to show that and to show it to its max. So it goes to freaking 25 instead of past 10.
The reason that this film looks the way it does, has its starkness and everything about it, is not that is because you're not supposed to be frightened by any of the things,
Exactly.
Largely because you're not supposed to be scared by any of it. You're supposed to be disgusted by it, but not scared. It's a very interesting line, this walk. There are stings. There are moments where you are literally in first-person POV, and you're supposed to be the character scared of what they look like now. But yeah, as an audience member from a more objective camera view position, it's supposed to be all right there in front of you. It's supposed to be all out on the table, and it is. It very much is.
Shall we put our chips on the table? Give it a score?
We shall.
Yes.
We shall chip.
And what are the nominations?
Oh,
Yeah.
Abram, thank you so much for asking. Well, of course, Abram, this film is nominated for Best Picture. That's why we're talking about it here today. But it is also nominated for Best Director for Coralie Fargeat, Best Lead Actress.
Awesome.
Yes, it is. It is. Best Lead Actress for Demi Moore. It is nominated for Best Original Screenplay, also Coralie Fargeat. It is nominated, of course, for Best Makeup and Hairstyling.
Yeah.
And that'll do it. It did not receive an editing nomination. I feel it should have. I mean, the editing is what makes this work. And Coralie Fargeat herself was one of the editors on this. This is a bit of a gargantuan task, so a few on it. But like, the editing of her films is what makes them work so well. What makes them feel so visceral, and like the emphasis, the like atomic emphasis on subtle minutia, small things happening in her movie that make all the difference, is what makes her film so unique.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. You guys ready to find out what this one gets?
Yes.
Yes, he says. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Boom. Boom. Okay. We have a score. We've got a score. It's not a tie. So the substance is going to go. It got a score of 8.5. So 8.5 puts it below Conclave and above I'm Still Here at spot number 6 on our list.
5.
Spot number 5. You're right.
Yes.
The point
You-
breakdown is Abram gave it a 7.0. I gave it a 7.5. Tanner gave it a 9.6, and Tucker gave it a 10.0. So that would be
Tucker's second 10 of the set.
Wait,
Tucker's
So,
second
wait,
10.
10 out of what, Timo?
10.
What?
Oh,
My God,
That's crazy.
that's nuts.
So, Timo,
But-
you're the only one of us to not give it 10.
To not give it 10.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Maybe he
you had
loves
a limited
Wicked.
set.
Yeah,
we got
Timo,
Wicked
you
coming
have
up.
to
You
pick
know
one.
me.
Big wicked guy.
Big Wicked guy over here.
Well,
Which one
Timo, it's funny.
is
Why
going
do you say that, Timo?
But
Wicked's
fine.
next.
It's
Wicked's
next.
up next, buddy.
Wicked. Ah!
Yeah. I've seen Wicked.
haven't
Have we
seen
all
it.
seen Wicked?
I might as
Twice.
well, though. I've seen so many god dang Instagram posts. This sound mixer that I follow was Simon Hayes is he's the musical mixer guy.
I see.
Started with Les Mis, and so holy moly, I've read a lot about the sound production of Wicked.
He's a they
He's-
sing on set guy.
He's
That's who he
they
is.
sing on set guy.
Okay, interesting.
I've been holding
Interesting.
space for this viewing.
Oh, well, Abram, isn't that just so nice of you? That's so good.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to claw
uh,
open some space in the old schedule to go watch this long movie.
John M. Chu's Wicked. Wicked Part 1. Not, I don't know if they officially call it that, but whatever.
Whatever. Part 1 of 2.
I'm gonna sob like the cast did when I see the movie and agree that John M. Chu should have been nominated for best.
Robbed! How could they? God, he lit all those scenes so poorly. How couldn't they give him a director nomination?
He shot with 9 billion cameras on every angle.
Let me raise the stakes here. I've never seen The Wizard of Oz. I don't know fucking anything about what
Well,
any of
you've
this is pertaining
you've
to.
seen The Wiz, obviously. You've seen The Wiz.
The
Which is
NBC, the NBC original TV show, right?
No, it's a
No.
parody.
Oh,
It's
the parody.
It's not a parody. It's a retelling. It's a retelling of The Wizard of Oz.
Will Cash
Mm.
Cab be useful?
Cash Cab?
What does that have
Oh,
to do with-
Discovery. I don't know. Probably not. Probably not.
What does that have to do with Wicked?
I don't
You
know.
might have to answer Wicked trivia
Well,
while viewing Cash Cab.
The Wiz is set in New York City, and Cash Cab is also set in New York City.
And on that beautiful connection, thank you guys for discussing the substance. Tanner, keep drinking that activation liquid. You'll need it.
It's almost taken.
Only once. You can only drink it once, though.
A
Yep.
younger and better version of myself. I'd like to
possible.
see them try.
Beautiful.
That water bottle is like lined with a shit ton of BPA, so after you drink from it one time, you can't use it again.
I did quickly wash it out, probably not as well, because it was a gift. It shipped from somewhere overseas. I don't really know where. It had a distinct, like, factory fresh smell to it. So, I'm already brimming to the gills with fucking microplastics. So what does it fucking matter?
What's a couple million more? Well, that'll do it from us. Keep your microplastics within you. Write your thoughts down in the comments. Give a like, give a subscribe. Stick around here for more YouTube content. Of course, that's the website we're on. More movies and Oscars content as we barrel towards the ceremony at the beginning of March. So that'll do it from us. Wicked next time. Stay cool. Keep warm. Peace.
You remember that?
Hello.